everyone. Selfishness is not living as one wishes to live. It is asking others to live as one wishes to live. I say, let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea. So to be happy, we must not be too concerned with others. So the world says you have needs, satisfy them. Okay. So today we are going to know about this story, The Selfish Giant. The Selfish Giant is first and foremost a Christian fairy tale. The symbolism of the giant's garden recalls the Garden of Eden from the book of Genesis, while the giant's banishing of the children from his garden echoes God's banishing of Adam and Eve his children, in a sense, from the Garden of Eden, following his transgression, eating of the forbidden fruit. So this is will be knowing more on this story in today's video. So first, let's have a short introduction about the author. So about Oscar Wilde, the author of this story is Oscar Wilde. The life of the Irish novelist, poet, essayist, and playwright Oscar Wilde is as famous as, perhaps even more famous than his work. But in a career spanning some 20 years, Wilde created a body of work which continues to be read and enjoyed by people around the world. A novel, a picture of Dorian Gray, short stories and fairy tales such as The Happy Prince and The Selfish Giant, poems including The Ballad of Reading Gaol and essay dialogues, which were witty rivals of the Platonic psychological dialogue. So now this was the picture of Oscar Wilde. Okay, this is so the small picture of Oscar Wilde, and his birth name was Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wells Wilde, and birth date was October 16, 1854. And he was born at Dublin, Ireland, and he was Irish by nationality, and he educated from Trinity College, Dublin, and Magdalen College, Oxford. And by occupation, he was playwright, novelist, poet, editor, critic, etc. And he was in the period of Victorian era from 1837 to 1901. So he was in the literary movement, aestheticism. So his father's name was Sir William Wilde. He was an eye doctor. And his mother's name was Jenny Francisca Elgie. She was a poet and journalist. And his siblings, brother William, sister Isola, and he had a spouse, Constance Leliod, and children. He had two sons, Cyril and Vivan. And the selected works of Oscar Wilde now. So the famous works were The Picture of Dorian Gray. It was a famous novel. The Importance of Being Earnest. This is a famous play written by him. And The Ballad of Reading Gaol. So this was the poem written by him. So this The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a book famous. And this is the novel, The Importance of Being Honest. Okay, this was written by Oscar Wilde. You can also read these books. These are very good books. And these are the important literary works. In 1878, he wrote Ravenna. In 1881, he wrote many poems, and in 1888 he wrote The Happy Prince and Other Tales. In 1889 he wrote The Decay of Living, and in 1891 he wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray. in 1891, he wrote another three more books: Lord Arthur, Sevilla's Crime and Other Stories, Intentions, and Salome. These were all written in 1891. Okay, and in 1892 he wrote these two: The House of Pomegranates and The Lady Windermere's Fan. And in 1893 he wrote again two: The Women of No Importance and The Duchess of Padua. And in 1894, The Spinnex. 1895, he wrote again two: An Ideal Husband, The Importance of Being Earnest. And the last one, 1898, he wrote The Ballad of Reading Gaol. So he died in November 13, 1900 at the age of 46 in Paris, France. And this was his resting place, and the Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris, France. Okay, this was his resting place. So Oscar Wilde was an Anglo-Irish playwright, novelist, poet, and critic. He is regarded as one of the greatest playwrights of the Victorian era. And he's the like an Irish novelist, poet, essayist, playwright. Okay, and is famous as perhaps even more than famous than his work. Okay. So, but above all, it is Wilde's plays that he continues to be known for, and these include witty drawing room comedies such as Lady Windermere's Fan and A Woman of No Importance, and The Importance of Being Earnest that I have already shown you, as well as biblical dramas, Salome, which was banned from performance in the UK and had to be staged abroad. So these were short about Oscar Wilde, and Wilde was a proponent of aesthetic movement which emphasized aesthetic values more than moral and social themes. Okay, and they include even work is the curse of the drinking classes, and I have nothing to declare except my genius. Okay, when traveling through customs in America. So this was the like theme. And okay, here goes the story now, the main part of the story. So now in this story, Oscar Wilde have shown that like the selfish giant is first and foremost of like a Christian fairy tale, and the symbolism of the giant's garden recalls the Garden of Eden from the book of Genesis. So like the selfish giant, what happens over here, the children enjoying playing in a beautiful garden owned by a giant. So every day the children used to go and play in the giant's garden over there. Okay, and here you can see over here the children, these children, they are playing. Okay, and it was beautiful garden with flowers which danced and sparkled through the tall green grass beneath the blossoms and fruit trees. Okay, so here one day the giant returned. Okay, what are you doing here? He asked. He shouted in a very gruff voice. So my garden is my own garden and nobody will play in it but me. The children ran away and the giant built a high wall around the garden with a sign. Okay, and what was that sign of? That sign of what? That sign was of trespassers will be prosecuted. Okay, so now after this sign was put over here, nobody dared to enter in that garden. Okay, so he was very selfish giant. So now the children had nowhere to play. Okay, the children were so scared that they didn't even go over there. Okay, because like there was a wall built around the garden to keep the children out, and like there was a sign, warning sign put that trespassers will be prosecuted. So the children have to play in the road instead, but they miss playing in the selfish giant's garden. The garden too misses the children. When spring arrives, the garden remains under the spell of winter, with snow, frost, wind, and all oscillating it and preventing the trees and flowers from blooming and flourishing. Okay, so and how happy that those children, they thought how happy we were. They sighed to one another as they wandered around the high wall of the giant's garden. Okay, so now here the spring returned, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. So only in the giant's garden it was still winter. Okay, the spring didn't even came over there in that garden. So without the children's laughter, the trees forgot to blossom and the trees stood silent with the frost. Okay. So only the snow, wind, and hail were happy and decided to stay in the garden all the year round. Other they didn't even like stay over there all the year round. So, but the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden gave none. So he is too selfish, he said. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Okay, then he noticed, the north wind and hail were quiet and the air was filled with a sweet perfume. Okay, sweet smell. Now, then what happened? Then he saw the most wonderful sight over here. Look here. So, through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept inside his garden. Okay, they were sitting in the branches of the trees, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms, and the birds tweeted, sang very happily. So in one corner, it was still winter. So in it was a little boy over there. So he was so small that he could not even reach up to the branches of the tree. And he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. And then the giant's heart melted as he looked out. How selfish I have been, he said to himself. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened, they were so scared that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. The giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his two arms and flung them round the giant's neck and kissed him too. And the children came running back, and with them came the spring. It is your garden now, little children, said the giant. And he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. And the giant was never selfish